Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Praise Yahweh that we are here at Sukkot, enjoying boothing in our Master's presence, and come to this week's Shabbat, where we're going to go through Wayyiqra 19 and 20. We're going to look at Yeshayahu 66 a little later, and Amos 9 and Kefa Aleph, a few verses from that. And clearly today's theme is about set-apartness. And we're being set apart as we are boothing with our Master, separated from the things of this world, even though they're surrounding us. And we thank our Master that we can enter his presence and delight ourselves in his truth and be encouraged by being called out of darkness and being marked as set apart people in our Master, because the Sabbath is what marks us as his set apart people, that it is he who sets us apart, you know. Ricardo was saying, Shabbat Shalom, let us delight ourselves in the Torah of Yahweh and esteem him by the witness of our lives in righteousness. Carol is saying, Shabbat Shalom, beloved family. May we be encouraged and strengthened by the word of Yah as we are gathered together at his feet to hear him guiding us through his path of righteousness. We are truly blessed to be called by his name, even though we were lost, now we are found. As we rehearse boothing with him, we rejoice in the knowledge that he is coming soon to gather us to be with him forever. Amen. Okay, so we're going to go straight into Wayyiqra 19. Taylor reading. Okay, let's get there.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say to them, Be set apart, for I, Yahweh your Elohim, am set apart. Each one of you should fear his mother and his father, and guard my Sabbaths. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Do not turn to idols, and do not make for yourselves molded mighty ones. I am Yahweh your Elohim. And when you slaughter a slaughtering of peace offerings to Yahweh, slaughter it for your acceptance. It is eaten the same day you slaughter it, and on the next day. And that which is left on the third day is burned with fire. So if it is eaten at all on the third day, it is abominable, it is not accepted. And he who eats it bears his crookedness, because he has profaned the set-apart offering of Yahweh, and that being shall be cut off from his people. And when you reap the harvest of your land, do not completely reap the corners of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. And do not glean your vineyard, or gather every grape of your vineyard. Leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Do not steal, do not lie, do not deceive one another, and do not swear falsely by my name, and so profane the name of your Elohim. I am Yahweh. Do not oppress your neighbor or rob him. The wages of him who is hired is not to remain with you all night until morning. Do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind, but fear your Elohim. I am Yahweh. Do no unrighteousness in right ruling. Do not be partial to the poor or favor the face of the great, but rightly rule your neighbor in righteousness. Do not go slandering among your people. Do not stand against the blood of your neighbor. I am Yahweh. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Reprove your neighbor for certain, and bear no sin because of him. Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the children of your people. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. Guard my laws. Do not let your livestock mate with another kind. Do not sow your field with mixed seed. And do not put a garment woven of two sorts of thread upon you. And when a man has intercourse with a woman who is a female servant, engaged to a man, and to be ransomed, but she has not been ransomed, nor set free, there should be an inquiry. But they are not put to death, because she was not free. And he shall bring his guilt offering to Yahweh, to the door of the tent of appointment, a ram as a guilt offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him with a ram of the guilt offering, before Yahweh for his sin which he has done. And the sin which he has sinned shall be forgiven him. And when you come into the land, and have planted all kinds of trees for food, then you shall reckon their fruit as uncircumcised. For 3 years it is as uncircumcised to you, it is not eaten. And in the 4th year all its fruit is set apart, praises to Yahweh. And in the 5th year you eat its fruit, so that it increases its yield to you. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Do not eat meat with the blood, do not practice divination or magic, do not round the corner of your head, nor destroy the corner of your beard. And do not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor put tattoo marks on you. I am Yahweh. Do not profane your daughter by making her a whore, so that the land does not whore, and the land becomes filled with wickedness. Guard my Sabbaths and reverence my set-apart place. I am Yahweh. Do not turn to mediums, and do not seek after spiritists to be defiled by them. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Rise up before the grey-headed, and you shall favor the face of an old man, and shall fear your Elohim. I am Yahweh. And when a stranger sojourns with you in your land, do not oppress him. Let the stranger who dwells among you be to you as a native among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Mitzrayim. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Do no unrighteousness in right ruling, in measurement of length, in weight, or in measuring liquids. Have right scales, right weights, a right ephah, and a right hin. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. And you shall guard all my laws and all my right rulings, and do them. I am Yahweh.
Okay, so this week's Torah portion is called Qeḍoshim, which means set apart ones, and coming from the root word kadosh, which means set apart or consecrated. And what we see in this week's Torah portion is a clear instruction for us to be a set apart people. And it's fitting that we understand the heading for this Torah portion kind of makes it very clear as a direct command to the people of Israel to be set apart people. And we are set apart as he is set apart, or we are to be set apart as he is set apart. And as we dig further into this Torah portion, we begin to see in these instructions very clear regulations, instructions, commands that teach us how we are to be a set apart people. So this is practical living that's given here. And through the last Torah portion, we learned that we can't draw near to Yahweh any which way we please. We can't come to him in the way we think it's right in our own eyes and be found to be bringing an offering of strange fire like the sons of Aharon did and died, but rather we are commanded to guard the commands, the right rulings and the charge of Yahweh, and not do as the nations do. Don't do like Mitzrayim, where we were delivered from. Don't do as the nations in Canaan, where you're headed toward, because Yahweh vomited them out. He will vomit you out the land like he did to them because they defiled the land. And in this week's Torah portion, we learn a little bit more about how we, collectively as the body of Messiah, a set-apart nation, ought to live and are to be found guarding the commands of Elohim and keep all of the feasts as prescribed. This is what he's commanded us to do. And so when we look at the beginning of this chapter, we see Yahweh saying, I am Yahweh your Elohim, I am, or I Yahweh your Elohim. And all three phrases in this chapter are used 16 times. So the emphasis is very clear to us in this chapter with giving us regulations on how to live with one another. It's because we are to be obeying Yahweh. And we come to know that the I am, when we obey him, that's when we begin to know who causes us to be. The opening verse of this chapter, we again see that Yahweh spoke to Moshe and commanded Moshe to speak to all Israel. And that's the way Yahweh still speaks to us today, through Moshe, through the Torah. Metaphorically, we understand Moshe represents for us the Torah. Even Messiah said the Torah of Moshe. And so it's through the Torah that we receive clear instructions for set-apart living and helping us understand who we are in the Master. And so Moshe was told to speak to all the congregation. On most occasions, Yahweh would speak to Moshe. Moshe would go speak to Aaron, and Aaron would then maybe go speak to the elders, or at times to the entire congregation. But here, Moshe is commanded to speak to all the congregation, highlighting that there's no other word that's diminished as less from Yahweh when it's spoken through others on behalf of. But we do see something very clear that Yahweh is identifying here, especially what happened with Aaron and his sons. Now, Moshe is called to speak to all the congregation because these words are of vital importance. They had to hear it firsthand. It wasn't going to be, oh, is that really what he said? Yes, this is what Moshe has said from Yahweh himself. And it's important for us to understand the words that are used here emphasize for us the set-apart call is not just for a few people. It's for every single one who's in the body of Messiah. It's for all the congregation of Israel. This is an urgent call for many to be living as they should be, as a called out, set apart, chosen people, a people for a possession, in order for them to properly gird up the loins and listen carefully on how to be set apart so that you're not found to be looking like one of the nations, a foreigner that's not known by Yahweh. We're going to read it later, but I'll read it now anyway. But we'll close with this. Kefa Aleph, chapter 1, verse 13 to 16 says, "Therefore, having girded up the loins of your mind, being sober, set your expectation perfectly upon the favor that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Yeshua Messiah, as obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lusts in your ignorance. Instead, as the one who called you is set apart, so you also should become set apart in all behavior, because it has been written, be set apart, for I am set apart." The word Qeḍoshim as a plural of kadosh, because it speaks clearly that of us totally being set apart as a body of Messiah, set apart from the world, that is. In other words, we're not out of the world, because even when Messiah prayed in Yochanan 17, he didn't pray that Yahweh would take us out of the world, but that we'd be protected from the evil one, because we have a role to play. And we have a function to shine the light, to let our good works of obedience and set apartness be seen, so that everyone will esteem Elohim in the day of his visitation. And so, when we live set apart lives amongst foreigners that don't live set apart lives, it results in a harsh response often from people that aren't living set apart. And what makes Israel, which we are, set apart and separated, is his Torah. That's what makes us set apart. His word that he's given us on how to live set apart lives came in the flesh of man to be a witness and an example how we can be set apart in a world that is not set apart. Another way that we could actually describe being set apart to our Master and Elohim is that we are actually defined by the Torah. For in the Torah, we find our identity as Talmudim, or disciples or taught ones of Yeshua Messiah, who is the very living embodiment, the Word made flesh, of the very instructions, because he only came to do what the Father commanded him. So he didn't come for any other purpose except to obey and show us how we obey. And in that obedience, he died for us to be redeemed and face death, even of a stake. That's how obedient he was to the very clear instructions of Elohim. And so what's made clear from the very first verse is the fact that Yahweh is set apart, and he wants us to be like him. He wants his full image and likeness to be restored in him. That which was corrupted through sin, he's now given an access back to having that image restored through a proper obedience to his instructions, his commands, as given through Moshe to the entire congregation. And if we do not listen to, or guard to do the Torah, we can't be that set-apart nation, that people for a possession, that treasured possession, the set-apart people of Elohim. Because he said, when he spoke to Israel at Mount Sinai, he said, if you guard my Torah and my commands and my right rulings, then you will be a set-apart nation. So if you don't guard the Torah, you can't be set apart. That's the bottom line. It's obedience to the word that makes us set apart. 1 Thessalonians, or Thessalonikim Aleph, chapter 4, verse 1 to 7, Shaul says, "For the rest then, brothers, we beg you and call upon you in the Master Yeshua, that as you received from us how you should walk, and to please Elohim, you should excel still more. For you know what commands we gave you through the Master Yeshua. For this is the desire of Elohim, your set apartness, that you should abstain from whoring, that each one of you should know how to possess his own vessel in set apartness and respect, not in passion of lust like the nations who do not know Elohim, not to overstep and take advantage of his brother in this matter, because the Master is a revenger of all such, as indeed we said to you before and earnestly warned, for Elohim did not call us to uncleanness, but in set apartness." So what Shaul is saying here, he says, listen, what I've taught you is the word of Yahweh. So it's not about, you're following Shaul. You're following Messiah when you're listening to the words that Shaul is giving in regards to obedience to the word. And the desire of Elohim is our set apartness. He says, we beg you, excel in that. At the end of Chazon, it says, he who is set apart, let him be more set apart. We were having a bit of a discussion this week and just highlighting how obedience to the Torah is our foundation. in Messiah. And we can never truly know Messiah. Yochanan Aleph says, by this we know that we know him when we guard his commands. So we can never truly know him or have the confidence of knowing him when we're not guarding his commands in his Torah. Yeshayahu 28, Yahweh was rebuking a backsliding Israel that weren't guarding the commands. And he says, who would teach man knowledge? Who would he show the truth? You know, because it is line upon line, command upon command, because that's how we learn. That's how we learn every week. When we go through the Torah, we go line upon line, command upon command. That's the foundation of our belief. That's how you build. And yet, they didn't want to listen to them because all they viewed it as was line upon line, command upon command. And Yahweh rebuked them for this and said, listen to the word of Yahweh. In other words, get back to learning the foundational basics, because they'd corrupted themselves, mixed their worship, and so they weren't being set apart, they were being mixed. Cutting corners, oh, you know, you don't have to follow this, you don't have to follow that. And a lot of people today apply that same mentality when obedience is the foundation of the knowledge and witness of Yeshua Messiah that can be properly expressed through our lives. So we cannot actually have the witness of Yeshua Messiah. We cannot display the character and witness of Yeshua Messiah in our lives if we are not being 100% set apart and obedient to his Torah. So this Torah portion is about being set apart. And we shouldn't be resorting to measures like many who corrupt their worship, like Nadav and Avi, who bringing strange worship, thinking they've been set apart, they've been consecrated, they can do what they want. Surely he won't kick me out because, you know, I've been consecrated. Look what happened to them. It's an example, you know. And now set apartness in Greek, hagiasmos, means consecration or sanctifying. And the English word consecrate actually means to make or declare to be set apart and be devoted to a purpose with the deepest irrevocable dedication. I like that description because a lot of people say with their lips, yes, they're set apart, but their lives don't show that irrevocable dedication that comes from deep within. Because when you truly desire to be set apart, the corrupt matters of this world won't even cause you to be drawn away in the slightest. It shouldn't be, you know. We're a chosen people, a set-apart nation, and we are called to be set apart. Our Master said very clearly, you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set-apart nation, and this is what he said to Moshe back then. These are the words that you are to speak to the children of Israel. So just as Moshe back then, before they heard Yahweh speak the words of the marriage covenant, Moshe was to come and bring them this conditional clause. Now here Yahweh's again saying to Moshe, speak to all the children of Israel, because it's about being set apart. Why? Because if we're not set apart, we can't actually have Yahweh's presence in our midst. Because if his set apartness in the esteem of him coming in our midst and we're not set apart, we'll be destroyed. That's what it comes down to, you know. And so in verse 3 it says, fear your mother and your father, guard my Sabbaths. This is the first instruction that's been given after being told to be set apart. And that is to fear one's mother and father, and in the same breath, guard the Sabbaths. On a literal level, this is a clear command to revere and take weight of the instructions of our parents who are teaching and instructing us according to the Torah. We must understand the context here. If your parents are teaching you to disregard the Torah, then this isn't what this is about. Then you don't fear and, you know, them in that regard and give weight to what they're telling you when they're actually causing you to go away. We are commanded to respect our mother and father because this is the first command with a promise. Even Messiah quotes this, that, you know, we will be prolonged on the soil which Yahweh our Elohim gives us. In Ephesians, Shaul echoes the heart behind these commands. Always, we must understand context. These instructions and these things that even Shaul is teaching Torah is always on the basis of a community being set apart. Everyone hearing the words of Moshe and being set apart. So the responsibility of parents is heightened to teach the children, and children must not disregard what their parents are teaching them in regards to being set apart according to the Torah. That's actually the pattern that we're being given, because it's not a case of, oh no, you can do this because I know your parents aren't. No, Yahweh requires set apartness for everybody. Children, obey your parents in the Master. For this is right. Respect your father and mother, the first command with a promise. Shaul is quoting here. It might be that well with you, so that it might be well with you, and you live long on the earth. Colossians, he says, children, obey your parents in all, for this is well-pleasing to the master. So we have to understand context, because he writes to the Thessalonians, what is that pleasing desire of Elohim? Our set apartness. So when you're well-pleasing to the master, you're set apart. Okay, so children, obey your parents in all. In all what? In all instructions on set apartness and guarding of the Torah. So we see from the renewed writings this continued need that's being given to be a set apart people. So it's not a new doctrine. It's not a new teaching as in it's something that has never been before. It's a renewal of a ability for us who were once unable to hear these instructions and live before the face of the master. Now by his blood, we are now equipped and renewed to actually receive the very instructions that a nation received through Moshe. We now, as being grafted in to be part of that nation, are hearing these same instructions now. Do you want to share something? It's just another line in the genealogy. Yes. Yes, built on the foundation of the Torah, we're getting the instructions on how to actually stay standing on the rock of our deliverance, on the foundation, on the word that our master's given us. And the command to respect or fear our parents and coming with the promise of life is obviously with the idea, as I said, or presupposing, and it's not that Yahweh supposes something, he's calling for a standard, but it's with the context of saying that the parents are in fact walking set apart lives in complete righteousness before the face of the master, bringing them up in the ways of the Torah, as Devarim 6 tells us, that parents are responsible to teach their children when they walk along the way, when they sit down, when they get up. This is life. Torah is life. It's not just something that we spend an hour or so on a Sabbath once in a while, like some people do, or when they feel like it. It's an everyday life that needs to be the standard by which we live before the master's face. And so we're also warned not to forsake the parents' instructions. When Mishle 1 verse 8 says, my son, heed the discipline of your father, do not forsake the Torah of your mother. In Mishle 6 verse 20 again says, Shalomo, my son, watch over your father's command and do not forsake the Torah of your mother. So while there's a literal application of this in the context of houses being obedient to the master, we also realize the shadow picture of what the word is for us, and how in the parables of Shlomo, he personifies the Torah as a mother that nurtures. He personifies the role of a father as one who disciplines by his Torah in order to protect us. And so we have a Father in the heavens who we are to obey. As it is in the heavens, let it be done here on earth. And we have his discipline that we are to take heed of, so that by being trained by it, we can bring about the peaceable fruit of righteousness, which is actually the shalom of guarding the commands, because then we realize that this is what life's about, not rebelling, like naughty teenagers, that are rebelling against authority. No, we get trained by and disciplined to know what is actually good for us, what brings shalom, and therefore we want to stay within those boundaries of shalom. And one of the things that we understand here, Yahweh makes it very clear. You guard the Sabbath. It's set apart to you. Everyone who profanes it will be put to death. Anyone who does work on it shall be cut off from his people. And so right through the Torah, we see a number of occasions in Shemot, in Devarim, the clear command to guard the Sabbath. We're looking here at Wayyiqra about guarding the Sabbaths and the feasts. We understand that this is a critical call that needs to be echoed more and more and more, because most people are not guarding the Sabbaths as they should. Claiming believers. I mean, people that aren't claiming to be a believer aren't caring about the Sabbath. Guarding the Sabbath is again a foundational basis of our understanding of the rehearsal of feasts. And Yochanan Aleph, 1 John 2 verse 3 says, by this we know that we know him, when we guard his commands. Now, to guard something, one has to be alert and awake and watchful in order to be guarding. You can't guard much when you're totally asleep, and we have to be obedient. And guarding implies an act of obedience of what we hear being from our master, being instructed to us, and being diligent to watch over those instructions as representative of his kingdom that we are to be shining. You know, when we look at Yochanan Aleph, chapter 2, verse 3, when it says, by this we know that we know him, when we guard his commands, if we guard his commands. So there's a conditional clause. Many people claim to know him, but they're not guarding his commands, and that's when the master will come and say, I don't know you. But didn't we do this? We thought we knew you. I don't know you. Away from me, you who work lawlessness. But look what follows from that verse in Yochanan. We carry on from Yochanan Aleph, chapter 1, from verse 4. It says, the one who says, I know him, and does not guard his commands is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever guards his word, truly the love of Elohim has been perfected in him. By this we know that we are in him. The one who says he stays in him he ought also himself to walk even as he walked. Beloved, I write no fresh command to you, but an old command which you've had from the beginning. The old command is the word which you heard from the beginning. So it's not a brand new word. It's the word that's come right from Yahweh to a covenanted people, to a bride. He says, this is how you are to live. And this is how you'll know that I am the one who sets you apart. So if people disregard the need to keep the Sabbaths, and we know the Sabbath isn't any other day except the seventh day of the week, and if they disregard the need to keep the appointed times because collectively they are Sabbath-like days, they are set-apart moments, appointments with our Master, and if they don't guard these commands and they don't guard the dietary instructions, we got a lot of instructions given in this, Torah portion already in this chapter 19 of Wayyiqra. And this is how we get on with one another. We establish our love for Elohim, our foundation, that we want to do what he says. Now, when he tells us what to do and how to relate to one another, why would we disregard that? Because then you're not being set apart, you're being rebellious. And so Yochanan Aleph makes it clear that this wasn't something brand new, that he was writing a command that hasn't changed, actually. And our Master said, he is the good shepherd. He knows those who are his, and his own know him. And so we understand the joy of recognizing that we have a shepherd who we are to follow, that we are to know, and the Sabbath is a sign for us. This is a big, in Yechezkiel, Yahweh was rebuking again a backsliding Israel that was mixing, that wasn't being set apart. And in Yechezkiel 20 verse 12, he says, I gave them my Sabbaths as a sign between me and them to know that I am Yahweh who sets them apart. Again, in verse 20 of that, he says, I gave my Sabbaths, but you would not. It doesn't mean he decided because people didn't want to keep the Sabbath. Well, you know what? Maybe the Sabbath isn't a sign anymore. No, it's the same standard. And we've seen over many centuries the corruption of that. And you can look at the notes. I've quoted many theological views of why they somehow keep other days following man-made doctrines. I'm not going to go into that. You can spend time going into that yourself. But what I want to highlight here is Sabbath keeping. Without a proper Sabbath keeping, and I'm not saying giving half an hour, and then, doing your own pleasures, because Yeshayahu 58 identifies clearly for us of what it means to delight in the Sabbath and not thinking our own ways, our own thoughts, because it's a disciplining that's required, because it's not something we are accustomed to in walking in the ways of the flesh. But once we're trained by this idea and knowledge of what sets us apart, then it becomes something that is filled in us with a shalom that grows in set apartness. And the desire to not let it go gets stronger and stronger. Because, if you are a true servant of the Most High and you've tasted that heavenly gift, it doesn't mean that you're not at risk of falling away. The highlight of guarding is a continuous one, because you let that guard down for a moment, you can end up losing that mark of set apartness, Verse 4 makes it clear not to turn to idols. Now, in part of the words that Yahweh spoke to the entire nation, he tells us very clearly not to make other mighty ones, or don't have any other mighty ones against his face, that's trying to be in opposition to him, like Nimrod, that was a mighty warrior in the face of Yahweh, challenging his authority here on earth, as if Nimrod had some right to now, after the flood, now establish his authority as the way to reach the heavens and go to him. That's man-made ways. That Nimrod corrupt worship was a birthing of sun worship that actually still came from a corrupted heart before the flood that was still in the sinful man. And Yahweh made it very clear to a people that he had now set apart for himself to be a bride, which anybody can be a part of by the blood of Messiah, is that you don't have any other mighty ones against his face. In other words, you shouldn't try be serving him and try and serve or appease others. You don't make yourself a carved image in the likeness of anything in the heavens above, in the earth beneath, or the waters under the earth. You don't bow down to them nor serve them, because he is our Elohim. He's a jealous El, and he visits the crookedness of the fathers to the children of the third and fourth generation of those who love him. But he shows loving commitment to the thousand of those who hate him, but he shows loving commitment to 1,000 generations of those who love him. Now, 1,000 generations is just a metaphor for eternity, because we've not even had 100 generations since Adam. Okay, so it's kind of, we think, oh, it's so long ago, but it's not. In the scheme of Yahweh's timing, that's why it's so important that this is fleeting, our time here. And I really think that the older you get, maybe we're seeing Yahweh shortening the days. We often talk about that, but you know what? We can't waste a moment. That's why Shaul says we are to be redeeming the time. We shouldn't be wasting time. We should be making sure that we do not look like the nations. We should look like set-apart people. We shouldn't be taking the mark of set-apartness off us. And the first, or the one of the easiest way that happens in many people's lives is when they start cutting corners for Shabbat. Because if people can't actually guard the Sabbath and find delight in it, I can guarantee you in the rest of the week, they're not being set apart. So when people are working on the Sabbath, doing all their preparations on a Sabbath that should have been done before, I can guarantee you their lives are chaotic in the rest of the week, and they're not really living set apart. The Hebrew word that's translated as turn, when he says do not turn to idols, comes from the word panah, which actually means to turn or to turn towards, and it also means face, as in one's face. You get the word panim, which is faces. It really is the many characteristics, if you will. But really what he's saying here is don't look at or turn to idols or idolatry. We are to fix our eyes on the Prince and Perfecter of our belief. And when we fix our eyes on him, what you look at is what you will follow. And you know what? The whore has a whole buffet of things that she's trying to get people to take a look at and taste. And in the flesh, these things might look really awesome, but it's poisonous. But if we keep our eyes fixed on our Master and meditating on his Torah day and night and letting that be that which leads and guides us, we won't be interested in trying to taste and see what anything else is other than that which is good for us from our Master. And so we must learn, the Hebrew word, in order to turn to the Master when we repent, means a commitment to a turning away from that which we once were facing, and not turning back to it, but fixing our eyes and staying the course and remaining committed. And that takes discipline, it takes training, it takes an exerted effort to become a skilled workman that knows how to rightly handle the word. We must learn to turn our backs on a lot of the things that enslaved us in the inherited lies and the corrupted ways of man-made doctrines that have actually drawn people away from the truth rather than pointed them toward the Prince and Perfecter of our belief. Having then turned away from the world and the things of the flesh in order to follow and serve our Master, we must take heed to this warning to not turn back. Israel had been delivered from Mitzrayim, and here in the wilderness, they're hearing these words directly from Moshe to not have another mighty one before their face and not turn to idols. You've just left idolatry. Don't turn back to it. Don't go to it. Now, the Hebrew word for idols that's used in Wayyiqra 19 is elil. And it means insufficiency, worthlessness, things of naught, are idle, no value, good for nothing. So the instruction is clear. Don't turn to worthless, good for nothing matters. Don't turn to things that actually do not matter. Keep your eyes fixed on the things that matter. Do not turn to things that do not exist in the false hope of illusions that can never deliver what you actually expect. People put a lot of their hopes in things that are actually just fleeting, fleshly things. Anything outside of Yahweh is worthlessness, action. Don't put your trust in things of naught. Shemuel Aleph 12 verse 21 says, do not turn aside after worthless matters which do not profit or deliver, for they are worthless. I mean, there's your why. Some people say, why must I? Well, because it's worthless. How will we be best equipped to recognize that which is worthless against that which is not? By knowing the real thing with intimacy. Having an intimate relationship with the Master cannot be fully grasped without true obedience to his Torah. In fact, they go hand in hand. We are to be intimately engaged in seeking out and knowing the set-apart matters of Elohim. And intimacy takes effort, diligence, and much labored time in the presence of our Creator, learning his true ways, so that we're able to separate the worthless matters out from daily living. You know, the psalmist expresses his desire in Tehillah 119 to only look at the matters that matter. In verse 37 of Tehillah 119, he says, turn my eyes from looking at falsehood and revive me in your way. In other words, please keep my eyes from looking at junk. And there's a lot of people that claim to be believers today that thrive on knowing the latest conspiracy, the next evil that's coming along, to be watchful for. But yet, in the matters of the Torah, they're quite ignorant. So many people turning after falsehood, finding themselves turning to worthless matters. When you do that, you'll get enslaved by those worthless matters. In other words, they will actually... Have you found that people that are turning to worthless matters, that's all they can seem to be engaged in? Because it binds you. And they're not really running in the true Torah of freedom. When we turn to the Master, the veil of idolatry, worthless falsehood is taken away. You know, the bottom line is this, that if anything that we find ourselves submitting to that isn't clearly defined in the Torah is a danger of becoming an idol. Whether it be physical objects or even a commitment to a purpose that might seem right in your eyes, and even an idea that in the end will prove to be something that was pursued in vain. We need to learn to identify and distinguish the set apart from the profane, the clean and the unclean, so that we guard our lives from worthless matters. Because listen, worthless matters, it's like candy floss. It takes up a whole lot of space, but it actually has got no weight to it. It's got no substance. And all it can do is fill you up with sugar that's not good for you, you know. Messiah is our peace offering, and in this Torah portion it speaks about the peace offering, and peace offering speaks about our fellowship. Shaul reminds us in Romans 5 that we have peace with Elohim. You know, having been declared right by belief, we have peace with Elohim through our Master Yeshua Messiah. And the peace offering represents once again the intimacy that we have Messiah and with one another as a body that's being knit together by him in the unity of the Spirit. And one of the things that we see here is that, you know, shalom, the word for peace, is a word that can carry so much wealth and depth of insight to give us an understanding or grasp the understanding of what we've been given in the King of Shalom. You know, completeness, soundness, welfare, peace, prosperity, health, safety, security, whatever else you can think of in terms of the good qualities of being protected. And now when we have that shalom, think about that. When you have safety, health, prosperity, peace, soundness, completeness, security, should you be afraid of what man can do to you? So if you're afraid of what man can do to you, then maybe, just maybe, there's a lurking idol that you've been looking at, and you've taken your eyes off the Prince and Perfecter of one's belief. Now, the slaughtering of peace offering that we understand, we see all of these slaughterings that were done, and when anybody would bring a peace offering is a symbol of an acknowledgement of the intimacy that I have in the one who's actually caused me to draw near. A peace offering wasn't done because you did something wrong. Okay, that's the sin offering, the guilt offering, all those things. But the peace offering is one, it's actually part of a spontaneous offering that's also brought as something that recognizes we're actually able to come draw near to you. And if a peace offering was a vow or a voluntary offering, it was to be eaten it could be eaten on the next day. However, on the third day, it could not be eaten, because then that peace offering was not acceptable. So it just shows us, a nice text that shows us that what you did 2 days ago can be corrupted 3 days later. Does that make sense? Because a lot of people think, no, I've been saved. It's okay. I can do what I want now because he loves me. And surely he's not going to punish me if I just, do a little thing here. No, you can. That peace that you had with him can actually be rendered null and void in your life if you partake in something you are not required to partake in. And so this is a picture of the atoning work of our Master, because when Kepha reminds us to not let one thing be hidden from us, that with Yahweh 1 day is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years is as 1 day, we learn from the pattern and cyclical pattern and promise that our Master has given through this age of 7 millennia and what is to come, and the work that he came to perform in order for us to have an eternity with him. In creation week, on the 4th day of the week, he made the 2 lights, one to rule the day and one to rule the night, and along with the stars to rule the night, and he separated the night and the day. We understand Messiah, who is from the beginning, because when Yahweh spoke, light came to be. He already separated light and darkness in the beginning of creation as a clear witness of a separation between ignorance and knowledge. Messiah, having come in the flesh of man, who is the beginning of all, he is the author of all, but coming in the form of man on the 4th day, the 4th millennium, and being our peace offering. So when we partake in the Pesach meal as a remembrance of him, we recognize and celebrate the blood that was shed for us, remembering his death, but also the peace that we now have to draw near to him. Now, anybody that does not guard the Sabbaths and feasts of our Master now, but tries to come on the 3rd day from the 4th, which is the 7th millennium, and try and enter that reign when he comes again to say, hey, but I want to partake in the table, you can't partake in it. It's too late. So that's a parable insight again, that our Master has given that which we are able to have peace with him, but we must draw near according to his instructions and not treat lightly the work of deliverance that he has provided for all that call upon him. Because if you set aside the need to partake in the peace offering in the required time, prophetically speaking, you don't do that, then there is no peace for you when he comes, So verse 9 and 10, we're given instructions of not reaping the corners in regards. This is a wonderful witness for us in teaching us lessons on generosity rather than being selfish. When one had gleaned over one's field when you were harvesting, you weren't to go over it again and reap the corners, because that would be there for the poor and needy among you. Now, typically, leaving the corners would require belief, because remembering that this is an instruction which applies after the giving of one's tithe of one's harvest. How much of your hard work are you willing to allow to be going toward the poor and the needy among you? And in a day and age where selfishness is just getting more and more and more and more, the poor and needy among us are being neglected more and more and more and more. And our Master said, you'll always have the poor among you, because it's there in a way for us to teach our ability to have community mindset, body mindset in the Master. This was a way of providing for the entire community. This wasn't a free handout to the poor and needy that aren't actually willing to work. This isn't a handout to the lazy. Typically the poor and needy might have even been people that were working in the fields, but they're not the owners of the field, so they're doing the work, and when you leave, that's there for them. That's part of their provision too. So in a sense, that's part of what they've been engaged with as well. The story of Ruth and Boaz is a powerful witness for us in this regard, in the instruction being obeyed as Ruth gleaned from the fields of Boaz. And remember, even Boaz told these guys, listen, just throw a bit extra for her. I like her, In regard to the gleanings of that which was left of the corners of the field, a farmer couldn't choose who he thought deserved to receive it. He leaves that up to Yahweh within. Now, this isn't a, hey, foreign guys, come over here. There's a field that's left some stuff. It's always in the protective boundaries of Yahweh's covenanted people living in obedience to him. you know. So when we all are in unity of the Spirit, look how things are actually designed to prosper all, you know. So we understand here, even in modern farming practices, you get these crop fields that a lot of people like to, you know, claim it's aliens that are doing these circles. No, it's just the way they're designed to make a crop field. So if you cut a circle crop field in a square or rectangular field, you're going to have some corners that aren't cut. So it's a nice practical lesson to say, but now, how big are your corners? Well, that's up to you. You know, again, it's possibly a test of selfishness and pride that is being done to those that have the ability to do so. Watch your tongue, verses 11 to 18. And it's be on guard against what you say, how you say, and when you say, if you say. Do not lie, do not cheat, do not steal. Now the Hebrew word for lie, shakar, means to do or deal falsely or lie. So it's not just the words. It also means you can lie by your actions. It comes from the idea of kind of deceiving somebody in one's word and their supposed actions, because you might have committed to something with your mouth, but your actions have said, so you've lied. You didn't follow through with what you said you would do. It also, now the Hebrew word for cheat, when it says do not lie, cheat, or steal, cheat is kachash, which means to be untrue, to lie, to fail. And the word for steal comes from the root word ganav, which means to steal, kidnap, take without consent. And in speaking of the righteous remnant that will be delivered, we're told in Yeshayahu 63 verse 8, he said, they are my people, children who do not act falsely, and he became their savior. The true remnant bride of Yahweh does not act falsely, does not lie, does not cheat, does not steal. In the account of Achan, who stole that which was put under the ban in Jericho, we see in Yehoshua 7 verse 11, when Yahweh said Israel had sinned, and they had also transgressed my covenant which I commanded them. And they have even taken some of that which is under the ban, and have both stolen and deceived, and also put it among their own goods. So both words, ganav for stolen and kachash for deceived, are used here. And so we understand that when Shlomo writes these parables for us in Mishlei 30, it's a wonderful parable. He starts off saying, listen, I'm not very clever, I don't know how everything works, but what's the name of the Father, the name of his Son, if you know? And he goes on and he says, remove falsehood and a lying word far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but feed me my lawful bread. Why? Lest I become satisfied and deny Yahweh and say, or deny you and say, who is Yahweh? Lest I be poor and steal and seize the name of my Elohim. So that denial here is the word kachash, which is acting deceitfully. Shaul writes to Timotheus in 2 Timothy 3 verse 5, he says, having a form of reverence, but denying its power, and turn away from these, because he was speaking about warning Timotheus to turn away from wrong people who they might have a form of reverence. So outwardly, they look like they should be like us, but they're denying the power of being set apart. He says, turn away from those who are untrue to the covenant and doing as they please, without seeking the clear guidance of the word as the prescribed standard for set-apart living. Turn away from those who are claiming to be righteous, yet claim that the standard of righteousness has changed. Because Yahweh is the same yesterday, today, and forever. We also take note that the Greek word that's used in the Septuagint for steal is klepto, which means steal, commit theft. And Shaul reminds us in Ephesians, let him who stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, so that he may have somewhat to share with those in need. Let no corrupt word come out of your mouth, but only such as is good for the use of building up, so as to impart what is pleasant to the hearers. Now, it's from this Greek word klepto that we get kleptomania, which is the persistent neurotic impulse to steal, especially without any economical motive. It's just people just like to just take stuff that's not theirs, And there's another way that we learn clear lessons here, and that is that there's a clear warning for practicing deceit, speaking lies, robbing, stealing. Tehillah 101 verse 7 says, "He who practices deceit does not dwell in my house. He who speaks lies does not stand in my presence." Colossians 3 verse 9, Shaul writes, "Do not lie to each other, since you have put off the old man with his practices." So it means when we were walking in the flesh lies. Now, the Greek word for lie, pseudomai, means to lie or speak deliberate falsehoods. It's like you deliberately are speaking wrong, which highlights that one knows what they're saying. It's not like, I didn't know I was saying something wrong. It's like, I'm going to trick you, deceive you. Now, to steal is not limited to the theft or unauthorized taking of physical possessions only, because a person can also be found stealing another's time, their joy, their strength, or even their reputation, breaking down their character through the use of slander and gossip, and taking advantage of another's kindness and making a person feel they have to do more than they've already done. And this is another way of stealing. Stealing somebody's joy is kind of, that's a big thing that happens to many believers today by those of the world. And that's where we have to learn to put on the armor of Elohim and know where things are coming from. To deceive, lie, or steal, they're all variations of the same thing. Deceit can also be a form of stealing, just as lying can. And anyone found to be doing any of these lacks the character of Yeshua Messiah being shaped in their lives. And anyone who practices such, Yahweh makes clear, they're not fit for the kingdom. And we are not to swear falsely. Our master makes it clear in Matthew 5. We shouldn't swear falsely at all. To swear, I'm not talking about using corrupt language, but to give one's oath. To swear in Hebrew comes from the word shavah, which means to exchange oaths, take an oath or a vow. In other words, you're committing with your words, your verbal expression, to do something. And if you don't do it, you've committed falsely. And you haven't followed through and declared something that should be done, or what you've declared you will do, you haven't followed through. And we see in the word that it's sin in you until it's completed. A lot of people are using the name of Yahweh in vain by saying they set apart, but then their lives show a lot of corruption. And their vocal declaration of vowing to be set apart is proven false. And so they profane the word of Yahweh as opposed to esteeming the word of Yahweh. Don't oppress your neighbor nor rob him. In other words, you know what? We shouldn't be trying to, this is a good lesson, because this word for oppress, ashak in Hebrew, which means to defraud or intimidate, it's concerned with the acts of abuse of power over somebody. And taking advantage of somebody, burdening them with things that are worthless matters, trampling them, crushing them to a lower position or stature, and making them feel that they have no worth. This kind of act of oppression against another is a breach of belief in our master. To oppress another is actually equated to witchcraft, adultery, and falsehood. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. Malachi 3 verse 5 says, "I shall draw near to you for right ruling, and I shall be swift against the practices of witchcraft, against the adulterers, against them that swear to falsehood, and against those who oppress the wage earner in his wages, and widows and the fatherless, and those who turn away a sojourner and do not fear me, said Yahweh of hosts. He who oppresses the poor reproaches his maker, but he who esteems him shows favor to the needy." That's Mishle 14 verse 31. To withhold wages from him who has been hired is sin in you when they cry out to Yahweh. Now, to oppress the wage earner in his wages is not only to withhold wages, but also not give them what's worth, what is. We see it today, where people, the people are needy for work, they need to eat, and you get people that don't even give them enough to get the transport back and forward to where they need to be working. And so, as believers, we should give what's fair and just. Like the parable of the talents, before you agree, this is, when our master gives the parable of each one got a denarius, and the one who worked all day was upset because the guy who only worked an hour got the same rate. And, well, that's what was agreed. But it's about Yahweh is not the one that's unjust. And so therefore, in our application of doing what is right, we shouldn't be unjust in our oppressing people and abusing them with power just because we want something done and we're not willing to actually pay the going rate, should I say, I mean, I don't know about other countries, but in this country, the minimum wage is really not great. And people barely scrape by. And as believers, when you are hiring somebody, set the standard of being kind and being fair and just, Do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it is in the power of your hand to do so. I mean, if you don't have the ability to do something, you can't do something. We must always consider others first and do our utmost to meet the needs of others when we are actually able to do so, Don't curse the deaf, nor cause the blind to stumble. This is a literal command that we can clearly see. If somebody's deaf or blind, you shouldn't just be cursing them or to curse in Hebrew means to make light of. It can also be to joke about and to despise or, not take them serious. So that's a literal level, but on a spiritual level, we also see there are a lot of people that are spiritually deaf and blind, as in Yeshayahu, hearing but not hearing, seeing but not seeing. So we shouldn't treat them lightly. We should actually be urgent in wanting them to hear the call and to give the good news. There are a lot of people who stubbornly blind and deaf to the truth, and they choose not to hear and see. And those that are holding fast to traditions of man and forsaking the commands of Elohim, we learn balance because there's the nations out there that don't know Elohim that we need to show them Elohim because they don't have eyes to see, they don't have ears to hear, and we need to be proclaiming until destruction comes. But then there are those who claim to be brothers that are acting like the nations, and Shaul then says, turn away from these. So there's that balance that must be understood when we turn away and when we don't turn away, because we are to rightly rule and we are not to show partiality. To rightly rule, rightly, is to do it according to the Torah, not according to one's own assumptions of the Torah. Today we find many people claiming the do not judge clause when it's totally scripture. We are to judge. He said appoint judges. How else are you going to administer right ruling if there's no judgment going on in the body? We are to judge righteously, according to Yahweh's standard. To rightly rule comes from the word shafat, which means to govern, decide, to rule, to judge, and we are to do this according to the word of Yahweh. Colossians 2, Shaul reminds us, and he says to the believers there, let no one therefore judge you in eating or drinking, or in respect of a festival or a new moon or Sabbaths, which are a shadow of what is to come, but the body of Messiah. Now, many who are not on the foundation of the Torah and don't know Elohim, because if you haven't got the Torah as your foundation, you don't know Elohim, number one, they twist these words to come up with a doctrine of falsehood, doctrines of demons, actually. And it's misinterpreted by so many, and as a result of being this misinterpretation being taught, there's so many that don't understand these things, and it's misunderstood by those who don't understand the Torah clearly, because it's actually telling us, Shaul is telling us here, that the body of Messiah should not let outsiders, those that aren't in the body, come and judge us because we're obedient to keeping the feasts and the Sabbaths and what we are to eat and what we are to drink and what we are not to eat and what we are to drink, because we follow the Torah. So don't let anybody that's not in covenant come and tell you why you shouldn't do this and why you haven't, you're trying to be. Don't worry about that, because everything that we do is a shadow picture of what is to come. And a lot of people, when they see it's a shadow picture, they say, well, it doesn't matter now, it's coming and I'll do it then. No, if we don't rehearse that shadow picture, we'll never taste it. But the body of Messiah is to judge one another on eating and drinking, respect of a festival, a new moon, and a Sabbath. We are to hold each other accountable to these things. We are to show each other corrupt ways that might be surfacing when we see it surfacing within the body and saying, hey, this isn't the way, because we have one judge, one lawgiver, one savior, and that's the standard that we must maintain. Not whatever's right in your eyes, if you claim to be part of the body. But if you're not, then you know what? Do what you want to do. I mean, I'd prefer that you'd want to do what we do in the body of Messiah. I've often said at times when meeting people and when they start sharing the word, and I'll say to them clearly, listen, I'm not telling you, I'm sharing what we do. And if you claim to be on the foundation that we are standing on, then I am going to be very straight with you. But if you're not, then you know what? Do as you do if you want to. That's your choice. But if you claim to choose the Messiah and his truth, then it's our responsibility to hold each other accountable. There's no partiality with Elohim. There are a lot of people today neglecting to gather for Shabbat. We're commanded to do that, by the way. It's a commanded set-apart gathering. And when confronted, they raise up this feeble wall of do not judge. Because they had to maybe do something, or, they break the Sabbath for whatever. And the fact that they break it already tells you they're not keeping the Sabbath. Just as an example, Shaul makes it very clear in Romans that there's no partiality with Elohim. In Acts 10, verse 34 to 35, Kepha said, truly I see that Elohim shows no partiality, but in every nation he who fears him and works righteousness is accepted by him. What a wonderful passage. Kepha was told to go to the house of Cornelius. Remember when he had the vision, rise up and eat and all the unclean animals? I've never eaten anything unclean, because Yahweh was speaking to his senses in the flesh, because it was lunchtime and he was pretty hungry, while he was meditating on his roof. And when he went to the house of Cornelius, he was like, hey, there was like, oh, should I be going to these nations? And when he saw the Spirit of Yahweh upon them, he understood the vision, that Yahweh shows no partiality. And he says, he commanded them then to all be immersed in the name of Yeshua Messiah. It's a powerful text. One of the biggest things that's doing partiality today in many who claim to be in the body are racists. Racism is partiality. And Yahweh has created all for his purpose. And anybody can become part of the body of Messiah. And any Torah group that is claiming a certain race only is showing partiality, and they're not of Yahweh, and he doesn't know them. Now, I say this with much boldness and concern because, especially in our country and many countries, Yahweh does not tolerate racism, because he made all man from one blood. And therefore, all, as Kepha witnessed, because Kepha was one that was kind of, let's keep it with the Yehudim, And Yahweh showed him, don't show partiality. Yes, Jackie?
Thank you. Oftentimes I've heard people say that it doesn't mean that to me.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that to me. To me means this is not true.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
They actually deny.
When somebody says it doesn't mean that to me, then they might as well throw their word away. I mean, some people say, oh, how can you say that? Well, if you're saying it doesn't mean that to me, why are you reading it? Yes. Ephesians 6 verse 9 says, masters, do the same. Refrain from threatening, knowing that your own master also is in the heavens and there's no partiality with him. In other words, Shaul's writing again in a chapter where about children obey the parents, and husband and wife roles in the family. Husband and wife roles. And then he's talking about how masters should treat their workers fairly. Colossians 3 verse 25, he says, he who does wrong shall be repaid for the wrong which he has done, and there's no partiality. Yahweh's coming to give reward to each one according to their work, whether it's good works or wicked works. Now, the reward of good works is everlasting life. The reward for wicked works is punishment of death, his wrath. If you call on the Father, without partiality judges according to each one's work, past the time of your sojourning in fear. This is 1 Peter 1 verse 17. In other words, if you are calling on the Father, and you claim to call on the Father, then you better sojourn in a proper fear and trembling in working out your deliverance, because he, without partiality, judges each one's work. So who are you? I'm using the example of racism today because we need to make clear there are many Torah groups today that are using racism as their basis of their belief. Whichever side of the race spectrum you want to put that, because we've seen various arguments from various groups of people. And I want to tell you right now, if we are seeing color as a partiality, you're not of Elohim.
So the saying the law was for the Jews,
Yes,
and it doesn't apply anymore.
that's showing partiality
So
too.
that says he treats people differently.
Yes,
And he does not.
no. You know, we must not slander. We mustn't hate our brother in our heart, because our master already said, he said, if you already hate your brother, you've already committed murder in your heart. So, Messiah didn't come to bring a whole new set of rules because he shows partiality and he said, shame was, it's too hard for you to keep the standards that once needed to be kept. No, he actually raises the level of understanding. It's not a new set of rules because the standard is the same. The understanding of what those rules are is now made more perfect in the witness of the life, death, and resurrection of Messiah on a practical basis, where once it's you do not murder, now it's getting into, if you're already brewing it here, that act of murder started in the heart. And it always started in the heart. Now he's actually getting to the heart of the Torah. We are to be on guard against using the word of Yahweh correctly. And that's why Yahweh has appointed, we must be on guard against using it incorrectly. Yes, because that's why our master has appointed some within his body to equip the body so that a proper right ruling may be administered in the body and people can grow up, become mature, not lack anything, and having themselves be found to be tossing every which way by every wind of doctrine. And, no, it doesn't mean that for me. No, we all are to have one mind, one spirit, one purpose, one goal, because we have one Savior. And he has not got differing standards. He's got a standard of set apartness or profanity. Yes. We're going to go through Kohelet toward the end of this feast, and we'll see how that ends. What Yahweh, it's for all mankind to fear him and guard his commands, And so we also realize that as we go through life, a lot of times we feel like taking vengeance, and we shouldn't, because vengeance is Yahweh's. Let that fleshliness go, because I know many of you are like, leave it to Yahweh. It's going to be so much more pleasurable when Yahweh does it. Okay? And believe you me, we can't take vengeance like Yahweh can take vengeance. So let's not try. So I know it can be, but we got to learn to know where certain things are coming from, overcome them in the master, extend kindness where we can, and turn away from those that we know we need to turn away from, so that we don't put ourselves in a position where we might be challenged with wanting to take vengeance,
And you'll sure say dust your feet.
Yes.
I don't want to listen. Just based on the conversations we've had, and there was a comment about Yeshua being much more than the Torah, or much bigger, and Yahweh is much bigger than the laws and the commands. And yes, it's true, but we're not.
Mm.
And he told us how to live.
Yes.
He gave us this. He revealed this to us, and that is what is applicable.
Yes.
So he might be bigger than this because he's obviously outside of everything,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not.
No. And to be more than means you have to have a basis to start from. So the more than doesn't discard the base or the foundation. It strengthens the foundation, And so we know that our master is coming in a day of vengeance. Right through the prophets and the Psalms, we see very clearly the vengeance of Yahweh that is coming. and it's coming swift upon the wrong. And those who are not found to be in him are going to face the vengeance, the wrath, the fiery wrath of our master. You know, when our master was in the flesh and he took up the scroll and he read from Yeshayahu 61, he closed the scroll before he came to proclaim the release, and he closed the scroll before it continues in the words from Yeshayahu and the day of the vengeance of Elohim, because it's coming. So it highlights he came to proclaim a release, and this is a picture of his compassion that he has for us. You know, because all of us actually in the sin of our fleshly nature deserve the wrath of his vengeance. But he came to take that punishment upon himself so that we who call upon him can find safety and security. But there's a standard to be held to maintain that safety, that shalom, that protection. And that is the guarding of the Torah. Because without the guarding of the Torah and following the Torah correctly, we have no safety, we have no foundation. Then we will be like foolish builders on sand, that when that wrath does come, it will be likened to a wave. It's coming with fire, but it will be likened to a wave that just washes it all away, as we have as a witness for what happened at the time of the flood. So we need to understand that what Yahweh is dealing with here is about how we relate to each other, how we are to uphold the standard of righteousness, that we shouldn't treat people differently because we see them differently or everything else. We have one standard to live by. And within the body, we are to judge one another. Shaul makes it very clear, even in Corinthians, one who calls himself a brother but is acting like nations, don't even eat with such a one. Don't even partake in the Sabbaths and the feasts with this person, because they should be treated like an outsider, with the heart for them to repent of their hardness of heart, their stubbornness and pride, and repent and come and submit to set apart living. Don't mix. In this chapter, we see a clear instruction on not to mix livestock, not to mix seed, not to mix threads. Now, these are practical things that teach us on a literal level why we shouldn't. I mean, if you mix your livestock, you're breeding something that Yahweh is not wanting to be brought forth naturally. You know, and it helps us understand that we as a set apart people should not be mixed in any of the ways or the matters of this world that has corrupted that which Yahweh designed for his creation to operate in. And each of these carries some significant teachings in helping us to live set apart lives as we sojourn here as pilgrims and foreigners until our master returns. We must be careful not to mix theologies, not to mix relationships, and not to mix our worship as we walk set apart lives. In other words, we must also try not to create our own form of livestock by making mixed livestock mate with one another. The world has literally done this. You know, Yahweh tells us not to do it because the nations are doing it. The world does it. They bring about mixed breeds of animals, and Yahweh's saying, I don't want you to be doing that. This is a literal command, and we glean some spiritual insight into this on how we can also see that some people say, but I'm not somebody that breeds animals, so how does this apply to me? Well, we can see that this teaches us to guard against the attempt of mixing that which is of Elohim and that which is of the world. Livestock were both a means of provision for food as well as the ability to work the fields. And we cannot have their designated, each one has its task, it has its duty, so to speak. We cannot mix these. So we can't mix the working of set apartness with the working of lawlessness and expect to get the desired results. In speaking of not sowing your field with seed, with mixed seed, I don't know what a seed is, by the way, but not sowing your field with mixed seed, we learn from the parable of the sower and how the seed is likened to the word and the field is the world, and how the different hearts represent how the seed is received and what happens with that. We also see the clear picture of cannot sow the world of mixed doctrines with the truth of Yahweh. Because if the seed is the word, then mixed seed must be that which comes from an alternative source that can also be sown into hearts. That's what people, often people think of the parable of the sower as only the word on the different soils of the hearts, which it is, but it's a parable. And it also warns us against the parable that we tie in with that, with the Donnell, that while men slept, an enemy came and sowed. He sowed Donnell. Donnell is also seed, but it can also go and corrupt good hearts. It can corrupt thorny hearts. So you can tie the two together, because the lies and deceit of lawlessness are seeds that are also sown into hearts of people. And while we cannot see what's in a person's heart, we can see from the fruit of their life what's brought forth out of the wickedness of their heart or out of the goodness of their heart. Because the good man brings forth the good that's in his heart, because the good word is sown in the heart. The heart is kept clean and pure through obedience, showing no partiality, no mixing. And it can represent one that brings forth a clarity of set apartness versus a mixed presentation of corruption. We can't mix paganism and all its deep-rooted practices of occultic sun worship with the truth of Scripture. And that's what most religious organizations that have disregarded Yahweh's Torah have done. We see that also in the world today, fruit and vegetables that might be genetically engineered to produce something or mix seeds to produce something else, that's also a way that the enemy does in trying to bring other doctrines in and present that as truth, and present from the Garden of Eden clause, surely it doesn't mean that, and present something that seems appeasing to the fleshly eyes of man. When it comes to our clothing, we must also heed these instructions. On a literal level, it means, you cannot wear two different garments, you can wear two different garments, but each garment cannot be a mix of wool and linen. Now, wool comes from an animal, linen comes from a plant. So we are able to identify the clear separation that Yahweh is giving us here. Firstly, practically, if you did mix the two in one garment, they'd pull and they would tear, because they have different qualities on how they respond to water or cleansing, etc. So the one would shrink or stretch and it would pull the other. So that's a practical level, but it teaches us valuable lessons as well of when we think about wool coming from sheep. Sheep has blood in it, life in it. A plant also has life, but it has life. Yes, it's from Yahweh, but it doesn't have blood. So we also understand that there is a wonderful picture that we're able to see, as in not mixing that which comes from a production of man versus that which is from above. So therefore, when we are to walk according to the Spirit, we are to walk according to the Torah, which comes from Yahweh, through Moshe, through the prophets. Not according to the ways of man that have decided the Torah, is across the sea, it's across the way, we'll decide what to do with it, we'll interpret it our own way, we'll add some catechisms in, we'll add some dogmas and doctrines, we'll take out what we don't like. That is a mixing of seed. And these things happen when men aren't alert and guarding set apartness. Our clothes represent our covering and our worship. We have been given clothes of righteousness, and we should be found to be spotless and blameless when our master comes. Now, he's given us the washing of the word to keep our garments clean. He's given us all that we need for life and reverence, so that we can't stand one day and say, yeah, but I know I was supposed to do this, but I didn't think it meant that. And so I just also want to highlight that the high priest had garments of different fabrics, but each garment was not mixed with the fabrics. Verse 20 continues with practical examples of what mixing seed causes, and it causes complications, and in a sense it goes into speaking about a servant who is betrothed or engaged, and it tells us those. Basically, what we must also understand is, you say no. Sorry? Assigned, yes, assigned, not betrothed, yes. So A servant who has been assigned, not betrothed. Let me correct that. What we also understand here is that, Shaul also writes, and he brings clarity to a lot of these things in helping us understand very clearly, do not be unevenly yoked with unbelievers. Because why? Because it causes complications. That's the bottom line. Now, when he was taking the good news, in Corinthians, he highlights for us, stay in the state in which you were when you came to the Master. Now, when he went to the nations and the nations who did not know Elohim, but now you come to people that are joined together and only one turns to the Master, well, you do your best to live at peace. But if the unbeliever wants to go, then you let them go. But as a believer now that has not been yoked, and when I talk about come into a union of marriage, and you now as a single person coming in the belief, learn the lesson to not be yoked with an unbeliever. Because it just causes confusion, complication, and heartache. I mean, it becomes a struggle. It becomes this light garments that aren't to be mixed. It's this tearing that happens all the time. And it's not really the design of our Master. But in those cases where one has come to the knowledge and you're already in there, look, it's not that it's going to be easy, but you do your utmost to be at peace. And it's then the unbeliever that must actually be the one saying, I don't want this anymore. Did you want to share something?
Just to stress, I mean, if you read this as somebody's engaged,
yes,
and you lie with her,
yes,
you've taken another man's wife.
Yes, it's adultery.
So this is a wrong word.
Yes.
We must change.
Okay, so
from our understanding of what engaged means,
yes,
like betrothed,
yes,
this is not what this is saying.
The engaged that this is meaning is assignment.
Engaged for service.
Engaged for service, an assignment,
Appointed. That's the service.
Ricardo is saying, clarify verse 19 of livestock mating with another kind. For example, you have two different types or kinds of sheep. Would mating between the two be allowed? Or does this refer to kinds as in don't mate a sheep with a cow or vice versa? Yes. Okay.
Also, people watch with some have watched programs on dogs, and they cross-breed dogs,
Yes.
and those dogs end up with a whole lot of congenital abnormalities. There's heart problems, renal problems, and the same happens to man. If you're married too close to your DNA,
Yes. Well, we read last week what you shouldn't uncover.
There's abnormalities.
Yes. So we should be, in our practical application of that, we should be doing our utmost at keeping a sheep, not trying to mix livestock and different kinds of livestock. Now, within kinds, there are certainly different breeds, and nature has a way of allowing that. But this is saying where you, as a farmer, literally take two different kinds and you force them to be together and nature will take its course. No, this is natural things where you don't allow this to happen, where the corruption of nature can take place because you weren't managing it properly. So it's all about stewardship again, and learning to distinguish and separate and make proper assessment and decisions on what is right and what is wrong and what should be together, what shouldn't be together. This is the dividing and discerning what is set apart, what is clean, what is, etc. Now, then it comes on to trees and their fruit. Now, in the first 3 years, a tree's fruit, if it bears anything, because normally it takes long before a tree even starts getting anything, but if it does produce something, it's typically very bitter. And most trees, as I said, don't bear fruit within the first 3 years. If any fruit is eaten before its time, it can actually result in being harmful to use rather than being of good use that it's designed to be. 3 years, the fruit is as uncircumcised. That is, it hasn't been cut. It hasn't been cut off and pruned from the trees, and it's not made edible to be eaten by anyone. In the 4th year, while it might look like it's edible and it can be, cut and pruned, It's left for Yahweh. So it falls naturally. It goes into the ground. It's for Yahweh. The first fruits of the edible yield can also be taken off in the first year. It's presented to Yahweh, you know. It's part of the first fruits. In the fourth year, Yahweh, let me rephrase that. In the fourth year, it's Yahweh's. The whole tree is Yahweh's. So you don't take off it to take to Yahweh. It's only in the fifth year when you're allowed to take the fruit of the tree. The first of that taking still belongs to Yahweh. But in the fourth year, everything is Yahweh. So you don't take from that tree. It will naturally fall off. I mean, we saw it with the lemon tree that we had, and it had beautiful lemons coming up, you know, but we let it fall, and it, you know, it goes into the ground, and there we go. We don't eat it. And it's only in the fifth year that when you begin to harvest, that the first of that harvest is given to Yahweh. So what has this got to do with daily living when I'm not a farmer? Well, in Scripture, a tree is often spoken of as representing people. You know, the man who meditates on the Torah day and night is like a tree that's planted by the waters, whose leaf does not yield or, you know, it fade. He yields, his leaf doesn't fade, yes, yields its fruit in its season, and whatever he does prospers. Yirmiyahu uses this same expression of being planted in the master and trusting in the master, not seeing when heat comes, always ready, you know, and Shaul writes about always ready to give a reason for the hope that you have. This is like being planted like trees of righteousness, a planting of adorning, as we see in the prophets. So we learn on a metaphorical level, especially with the instructions that Shaul gives to Timotheus, in that a leader or a congregation shouldn't be a new convert. And if he does, he might take up this position and take it to his head, and pride and position of power causes him to fall. You know, one who seeks to be an overseer must be one that's mature, and through Titus and Timotheus, there's qualities that must be seen, etc., as regarded. He says in 1 Timothy 3 verse 6, not a new convert, lest he be puffed up with pride and fall into the judgment of the devil. Now, why I'm mentioning this, because the Greek word that's translated as new convert is neophytos, which actually means newly planted. And it comes from neos, which is new or young, and phuo, which is to bring forth or produce or spring up or to be born. So it can be likened as a newborn or a newly planted tree. And from this instruction for newly planted trees as likened to those seeking a position of overseer, well, you can't be if you're a newly planted tree. Now, what we can see from Tehillah 1 is a picture of a mature believer who is rooted in the truth by the fountain of living waters, the stream of life, if you will, meditating day and night on the Torah, well planted, well established, able to give off fruit, not afraid when heat comes. A danger of a new convert becoming a leader or a teacher is that he's likely, as Shaul warns, he's likely to become puffed up, think how special he is. And if he's allowed to teach prematurely, it would be about self and not Yahweh. Because then matters of the Torah will be set aside for their own emotional preferences of the flesh. Before he is pruned, before he can properly praise Yahweh and be mature enough to teach, as the picture of the fourth year that's set apart to Yahweh and resulting in praise for Yahweh, his fruit must be genuine. And we learn from this that it's not to be partaken of. Why? Because if it's lacking the proper well-rounded perspective that only time and study can bring to a new convert, we risk a disaster if we allow trees to be eaten before their fruit can be eaten. Does that make sense? Fruit from trees, not trees to be eaten. Fruit from trees to be eaten before they ought to be eaten. Now, the revelation that's given to him in his patience and life experience is what will in time be able to feed many. The other aspect that we must also not neglect regarding is the producing of good fruit for others to eat. we are to be producing good fruit of righteousness in our lives. And after a certain period of time, we all ought to be bearing fruit that lasts, and fruit that's able to nourish, teach, encourage, build up. We're all called by the Master to go and make taught ones of the nations, but we're not all called to be in a position of overseeing and equipping the body to maturity to go and teach. But we all have the responsibility to be bearing fruit of righteousness that others may taste and see how good Yahweh is. Yeshua tells us that the tree that bears no fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. And when we're rooted in Messiah, being set apart through meditating on his Torah day and night, he tells us that we will, if we stay in him, we will bear fruit that lasts. And every branch in him that doesn't bear fruit, he takes away. This is judgment language, you know. Listen to what Ivrim says. It says, indeed, although by this time, in Ivrim 5, verse 12 to 14, some of you ought to be teachers. You need someone to teach you again the first elements of the word of Elohim. And you have become as such as need milk and not solid food. For everyone partaking of milk is inexperienced in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But solid food is for the mature, whose senses have been trained by practice to discern both good and evil. What's being said here is that so many people who ought to have been teachers already, like trees that have been around for a lot longer than 4 years, still need nurturing as if they've just been planted. So many people claiming to be on the walk in Messiah for many years, yet they're unable to teach others, stumbling in elementary matters, revealing their inexperience in true righteous living. They're unable to eat the meat of the word because they stumble at the foundational matters. Another aspect that struck me when we consider this analogy of how trees are a good analogy of people is that, you know, when I was in the hospitality industry for a number of years, at one stage I worked at quite a prestigious golf resort in the food and beverage. But, you know, when they had a new golf course made, and they would bring in these massive trees. I mean, it was 20-meter kind of like trucks that they brought these massive trees with huge root systems to put in the ground to make it look like this well-established golf course ready-made. But these new trees had to be supported by huge iron bars and iron chains, all aspects on the ground, so that nothing would be able to cause and only be taken off after a long period of time once the roots actually got stability in the ground. And when they were replanted with these heavy steel ropes on all sides, you know, what I see from this is there are so many people who find themselves maybe being replanted, so to speak, into a new family or new soil of believers, and need to learn that while these well-established trees, so to speak, coming to new soil, they should not throw their weight around. They need to be stabilized first. They need to grow in unity into the ground that they've now found themselves, so that in time they'll be able to actually give off the experience that they have. But done prematurely will cause destruction. Far too often, we also see newcomers to a group come in and disturb and divide by bringing in agendas that perhaps is why they got uprooted in the first place. But rather to take time to be stabilized in that new environment is a clear lesson again of proper submission to the authority and order that Yahweh has called within his body. It's almost like I used that picture of bringing big trees and making them ready-made for a golf course, because it was a practical picture that I could learn from. But I think there's a lot of mature trees today in terms of length of time that they ought to have been on the walk, but it's almost like none of them really want to be planted anywhere, yet they want to be the ones giving off their fruit, because they're not actually stable in being part of a community. So we must be on guard against allowing this instability through mixing, through corrupt ways, damaging the body of Messiah. No divination or magic. Now, we know we shouldn't eat blood, and this was an ancient practice that was done in divination and occultic worship practices for fertility rites, etc. The Hebrew word for divination is nachash, which means to practice divination, to observe signs, fortune telling. This same word is used for the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and its root can also mean to hiss, or to be understood as one who whispers or whispers a magic spell or enchants. In other words, it whispers in the ear and tickles and leads you astray from the truth. Fortune telling, making you like yearn or long for something that's not yours to have, but make you feel that that's attainable. What about observing signs? You know, the wicked and adulterous generation seek after a sign. Signs should follow us. So many today see too many signs in too many things, and they think they're being very spiritual. Many years ago, I had a brother that was from another country, that whenever we used to talk, I must be honest, it's like he saw a sign in everything. A number plate, a shop sign. And as he was driving, because he would have his phone on speaker and he'd speak to me and he'd put on this, hey, Craig, there's a number plate. It's got this number. Oh, this is what the Father's showing me. And I thought, okay, just calm down. We must be careful about trying to see signs in everything. You want to see something, look into the Word. Because that's what you need. And the only sign that's given to a wicked and adulterous generation is the sign of Jonah, 3 days and 3 nights. And I'm thankful for the Master that we didn't need to be given that sign, because we know the appointments of our Master and we understand his timing. But we must be on guard against this. There's an emphasis today, even books are written. You get people, especially even on this walk that we're on, we must be able to filter out the set apart and the profane. There are some passing themselves off as prophets and prophetesses, writing books that are claiming signs and wonders and visions and putting nice stories to a thing. Yet it's actually, you break it down, there's corrupt worship being presented through false titles and names. It's veering away from scriptural standard of set apartness. And then you've got to ask yourself, this is what people are being enchanted by. Why? And this is what Yahweh is saying. No divination or magic. Anybody that divined or practiced magic was to be put to death. So therefore today, that application for us is, it should be deaf to us. We shouldn't be entertaining it. Did you want to share something?
Yeah, just slightly back to people that are appointed. You were talking about being planted in a new soil, but you must also be careful about where you plant it.
What soil you, yes.
That overseer must adhere to the prescribed prescriptions and the Torah.
And if you find yourself in soil that is not according to the Torah, then get out of there.
When it comes to signs and things, it brought me back to, we can only test the prophecies to the Word. Because we go back to the Word to see if that prophecy is from Yahweh or not.
Yes.
Does it lead you away from the Torah, or does it bring you back to the Torah? And it made me think of there was a movement to pronouncing Yahweh's name as Yahuwah.
Yes.
And that person said he had a vision of a rusted pot, and he looked into the pot and the name of Yahuwah was. That's why he believed that's how. And if you go to the Word, only place there's a rusted pot, it's whatever is in there is a curse.
Yes.
But people don't go back and go and see, okay, well, does this line with the Word on it?
Yeah.
They just believe whatever
They're
sounds
told.
nice.
Yes.
And whatever maybe makes them think, okay, well, this sounds good. It would be nice if that happens. So I will believe it.
And they'll go, wow, why don't these things happen to me? You've got to see this,
What does the Word say about rusted pots and
Yes.
and tornadoes, and you see these things happen?
Yes.
They just, So we always have to test everything
Yes.
back to Yahweh's Word.
Seek first Yahweh and his righteousness, his kingdom and his righteousness. We need to be on guard against looking to I'd say the modern day fortune tellers. You know, Yeshayahu 65 verse 11, it says, but you are those who forsake Yahweh. Now he's speaking to people that are supposed to be serving Yahweh. He says, who forget my set apart mountain, who prepare a table for God, and who fill a drink offering for many. Forsaking Yahweh and his set apart mountain speaks of neglecting his word and his provision of deliverance and redemption, and neglecting the Pesach of our master, neglecting his feasts, and preparing a table for God and filling a drink offering for many. Most people won't understand. What does that mean? What does many mean? You know, at first glance, when you have no insight to the original text, it can often lose the stern warning that this is giving to us today. Gad was the name of one of the sons of Yaakov, which means troop. But in this text, this is not who it's referring to. It's a part of end-time prophecy where Yahweh warns of the great apostasy of his people, which we are living in terms of the falling away before the revealing of the lawless one takes place. It's well known and understood from the ancient times that Gad was also the name of a pagan deity, and so was Meni. The Hebrew word Gad, which can mean fortune or good fortune. That's why we also don't like to really use the word fortunate, because it's almost placing that element of we're leaving it to chance kind of thing. And Gad was worshipped as a Babylonian deity of fortune. It was often interpreted as the Syrian version of the Canaanite deity of good luck. A very sobering reality check today, who've often found ourselves in the past saying to others, good luck. But where does that saying come from? It's actually about putting one's hope in a fate or a fortune that one doesn't know and only hopes for, and not in the strength of Yeshua Messiah. Because saying good luck to somebody is not actually encouraging them in the strength of Messiah. Shalom would be a better use for that. The Hebrew word Meni actually also means fate or fortune, but it also means award. And Meni was the pagan deity of the Phoenicians of destiny, who was sadly worshipped by many Yehudi in Babylon while they were in exile. Many of the Yehudim worshipped Meni. Now, Gad, often referred to by many pagan definitions as the sun deity, and the name of Gad is applicable in referring all the way back to Nimrod that I mentioned earlier, the great-grandson of Noah, and who was characterized by Semiramis, who was his mother and wife, by the way, also known as Ishtar, Astarte, or Easter, or Sybil. She characterized Nimrod as a sun deity. And Gad being referred to as their sun god, Meni was and is today still regarded by many as the Lord Moon. However, when the ancient Egyptians applied this, they rendered Gad as the sun god, and Meni the god of fortune, and Meni as the lunar goddess of fate. You can read a little bit more about this in Come Out of Her, My People, or the two Babylons. And we used to say Babylon now, Babylonians, yes. What I'm trying to stress here in this Torah portion is that we are not to seek out our destiny or our fortune or our fate or our luck through divination. Well, we shouldn't be seeking out anyway. We know our purpose in the Master, and that's to be set apart. We are to be running in the way of set apartness. We aren't to be seeking out sources of divination and magic. We are to be putting our trust in Yahweh. He is our trust, and when we make him our trust, we are blessed. It doesn't matter about the heat around us. It doesn't matter about the drought, or as Yirmiyahu speaks, when blessed is the man who makes Yahweh his trust, and Yahweh is his trust, you know? And so we eat at the table of our Master with great shalom, and that is a picture of partaking at every feast, every Sabbath. So this is something that we are warned against, because the world has a way of mesmerizing people with a modern application of Gad and Meni.
Even though, some of the translations talks about, instead of magic, they say fortune telling or observe times.
Yes.
And I think even if you're trying to predict
Yes.
specific times, you're dabbling in
Yes. I say it to the shame of many within the body, that when our master made it clear that no one knows the day or the hour. I mean, we know that Yom Kippur, as we've been through, I'm not going to go into all the timing of feasts that represent his coming on Yom Kippur, but none of us know what year it is. And if you're trying to fortune tell the year according to the Yovels and according to that, Yahweh says if he did not cut short the time, nobody would save. So I leave it clear. We shouldn't be trying to dabble in what year he's coming. There's been a lot of guys already predicted that long ago. There's guys predicting in years to come, giving themselves time enough to, don't follow those that are telling you what year he's coming. Firstly, does Yahweh use Gregorian dates? I don't think so. He's got his own calendar, And so just be on guard against, because that's a kind of aspect of fortune telling that just as Israel were doing with the nations that Yahweh rebuked, so they need to be rebuked today. Because the focus is now on determining when you say he's coming, when you have no right to say so. Because even when he was in the flesh of man, he made it clear as he subjected himself to everything we're subjected to, that in the flesh you have no ability to declare. We do know that it's drawing near. I mean, that we can tell. We know that there's 7,000 years that will complete this age, and entering into that seventh day, he will complete that work. So yes, we have history that tells us we're on the brink of that, awaiting. He didn't come this Yom Kippur, perhaps next Yom Kippur. But I'm not going to define a specific year on which Yom Kippur, because I'm not going to be a fortune teller. The beard. I don't want to get into too much for that for sake of time. I've got an article on that, so you can go and check that out. All I can say is if you've got people who are claiming to be leaders, well, any man. I did an article, the beard. All scriptural men should have one. And we are to grow full beards, All set-apart men should have a beard. And in the Torah, we are told this, and next week we'll see leaders. So it further emphasizes, because if a leader begins to round the corners of their beard or cut their beards or shave their beards off or shape it into goatees or just something without a full beard, they're going to teach their followers to do so. So there are certain things that we can see in terms of a standard of Yahweh's word being the right ruling to follow, that one who is teaching certainly should have a beard. And if he hasn't, then it should be a red flag, That's all I'm going to say. Please look at the notes. I go through all the scripture verses regarding beards to highlight clear lessons on why it's important to observe these right rulings, and not to say, oh, no, it doesn't mean that anymore today. Yahweh doesn't show partiality from generation to generation. No tattoos or cutting for the dead. A lot of people like to say, yeah, but my tattoo isn't for the dead, and that's the context of this. No. Tattoo marks in Hebrew is toveth ka'aka. Okay? I mean, the sound already tells you shouldn't be doing it. Kethoveth means impression, inscription, or mark or tattoo. It comes from the verb kathav, which means to write, inscribe, or write down. And ka'aka means an incision or to imprint or tattoo or mark. And we are not to write into the skin, the flesh of our beings, anything. Any wording, or inscribe an incision by making a mark that you're marking a picture or a word, etc. Again, what claiming set-apart teachers are no beard, full of tattoos, shouldn't be listening to them. Now, I'm not trying to show, I am showing no partiality. I mean, that's how we should be. Because I'm not trying to be, hey, look at this. I'm going according to what Yahweh's word is. And you know what? In our day and age, we have heard of many people, not many, but a number of people that have had tattoos and coming to the belief have had them removed. Yes, it costs a lot of money, but that's the commitment. So I do believe they are clear things that should happen. And when one comes on the walk, you're not going to get more tattoos, So stay in the position that you were when you came to the Messiah. Understand that. But then we got to understand qualities and things of leadership. That's, again, another quality that must always represent the character and witness of the set apartness of our Messiah. So while many might get offended by these things, don't get offended at me. This is the word of Yahweh. And don't get offended at Yahweh. Rather receive the discipline and insight and understanding of knowledge. Guarding the Sabbath is repeated again and again and again. Over and over, we are told, guard the Sabbath. It's what makes us set apart. And this is something that we should take serious in who we are in the Master. There's a lot of things in this chapter, and it's all about practical living in relation to one another before the face of the Master. And these are day-to-day aspects that is not some spiritual thing that, oh, I'll only do that on one day of a week. This is everyday living matters that our Master's presenting to us in how we live set-apart lives. You know what? If you want to look like the nations, how are you going to be set apart? Following on from last week, do not do as the nations do. I must say, over the last few years, just touching on what we're talking about now, the growing need for people to mark their bodies. It's just getting more and more and more and more. And we who are set apart shouldn't be doing what the world does. We should be listening to Yahweh's standard. Jillian is saying, I thought that removing a tattoo was another way of cutting the skin. Okay, this incision to mark the skin is about marking and for purposes of putting a permanent mark there for a sign of worship, or, then people say, I'm not worshiping, I've just put whoever's name there, or it's really inscribing something, because the word is to inscribe, which entails either a picture or word that is relaying a message. That you don't put in the skin. Incision or cutting that's done for medicinal purposes or for restoration is not the same incision that is done. No. So I would say I would prefer that somebody remove a tattoo would show their commitment to taking that which was done in error. And it is possible. And it's even possible today to be done without incisions being made. So while we're getting into the day-to-day practicalities, it's worth answering some of these questions. So sometimes people aren't able to afford that kind of treatment. I understand that, but then don't go and get more, Okay, chapter 20.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Say to the children of Israel, any man of the children of Israel, or of the stranger who sojourns in Israel, who gives any of his offspring to Molech, shall certainly be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. And I shall set my face against that man, and shall cut him off from the midst of his people, because he has given of his offspring to Molech, so as to defile my set-apart place and to profane my set-apart name. And if the people of the land at all hide their eyes from the man, as he gives any of his offspring to Molech, and do not kill him, then I shall set my face against that man, and against his clan, and shall cut him off, and all who go whoring after him, even go whoring after Molech from the midst of his people. And the being who turns to mediums and to spiritists, to go whoring after them, I shall set my face against that being, and cut him off from the midst of his people. And you shall set yourselves apart, and shall be set apart, for I am Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall guard my laws and do them. I am Yahweh who sets you apart. For everyone who curses his father or his mother shall certainly be put to death. He has cursed his father or his mother, his blood is on him. And the man who commits adultery with the wife of another man, who commits adultery with the wife of his neighbor, the adulterer and the adulteress, shall certainly be put to death. And the man who lies with the wife of his father has uncovered the nakedness of his father, both of them shall certainly be put to death, their blood is upon them. And the man who lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall certainly be put to death, they have made confusion, their blood is upon them. And the man who lies with a male as he lies with a woman, both of them have done an abomination, they shall certainly be put to death, their blood is upon them. And a man who marries a woman and her mother, it is wickedness. They are burned with fire, both he and they, that there be no wickedness in their midst. And a man who has intercourse with a beast, he shall certainly be put to death, and the beast you kill. And a woman who approaches any beast, and mates with it, you shall kill the woman and the beast. They shall certainly be put to death, their blood is upon them. And a man who takes his sister, his father's daughter or his mother's daughter, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, is it loving commitment? And they shall be cut off before the eyes of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness, he bears his crookedness. And a man who lies with a woman during her sickness and uncovers her nakedness, he has laid bare her flow, and she has uncovered the flow of her blood. Both of them shall be cut off from the midst of their people. And do not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, nor your father's sister, for that is laying bare one's own flesh. They bear their crookedness. And a man who lies with his uncle's wife, he has uncovered his uncle's nakedness. They bear their sin, they die childless. And the man who takes his brother's wife, it is uncleanness. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness, they are childless. And you shall guard all my laws and all my right rulings and do them, so that the land where I am bringing you to dwell does not vomit you. And do not walk in the laws of the nations which I am driving out before you, for they do all these, and therefore I loathed them. But I say to you, you are going to possess their land, and I myself give it to you to possess it, the land flowing with milk and honey. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who has separated you from the peoples. And you shall make a distinction between clean beasts and unclean, and between unclean birds and clean. And do not make yourselves abominable by beast or by bird, or whatever creeps on the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean. And you shall be set apart to me, for I, Yahweh, am set apart, and have separated you from the peoples to be mine. And a man or a woman in whom there is a medium, or who are spiritists, shall certainly be put to death. They are to stone them with stones. Their blood is upon them.
Okay, so the start of this chapter deals with the first section. Quite a big portion of this chapter deals with Molech. We looked at Molech last week, so I don't think I need to go in depth into Molech again, but certainly is a lesson for us of what's refining you. Molech, meaning he rules, and we have one king. From Molech we get Melech, the noun, which is king. We have a king who we submit to, and we have an authority that we subject ourselves to and walk according to his ways. Molech is a picture of the anti-Messiah, the counterfeit, the one that many are subjecting themselves through and being refined by, from children to adults, if you will. We started this Torah portion about the need for children to obey the parents, because it's the responsibility of parents to be bringing children up in the right ways of the Torah. Then we come to a chapter that's warning against Molech, because Yahweh is saying, I know the heart of this people. When they go to that land, they're going to be swayed, because Yahweh knew. He already told them, when you go there, you're going to do the ways of the nations. But he's warning them, because nobody can come and ever say, but I was never told that. Yahweh's made it clear what is his right standard for living, what is his standard for set apartness. And we see a wonderful a picture here in separating that which is set apart and that which is not set apart. And one of the things we see going through all of these instructions, verse 6 makes clear the result of not obeying the command that's given in Wayyiqra 19 verse 31, where Yahweh says, when it talks about mediums and spiritists, when he says he will set his face, he himself will set his face against one who turns to mediums and spirits, and he shall cut them off. Remember King Shaul? Remember how he put a ban in all the land, but then he went to go and see a medium. Shaul died for his trespass, which he trespassed against Yahweh because he did not guard the word of Yahweh, and also for asking a medium to make inquiry and did not inquire of Yahweh. So he put him to death and turned the reign over to David, son of Ishai. That's 1 Chronicles 10, verse 13 to 14. It's in 1 Samuel 28 where you see the account of Shemuel seeking a medium. Shaul, it's in Shemuel where you see Shaul seeking a medium. Yes, she woke up Shemuel. He said, why are you waking me up? You know, verse 7 emphasizes clear command to be set apart as Yahweh is set apart. And the phrase that is, and you shall set yourselves apart, is Vehith Kadit Shem. And it comes from Kadash, which we know means to be set apart. And it really is, when Yahweh says, I am Yahweh your Elohim, and I am set apart, therefore you better be set apart. I'm adding better. Therefore you shall be set apart. It really is, it's not a suggestion. You know, Yahweh is the one who causes us to be. And if we're not being set apart, we are saying we cause ourselves to be. We're basically saying we're the ones defining our lives and we'll choose what we want to do. We'll do what's right in our own eyes. Then Yahweh is not your Elohim. Then you're your own Elohim. And being your own Elohim, try and save yourself. Because no man can redeem another. You know. Verse 8 reiterates our need to be obeying the commands of Yahweh's laws, guarding his laws, because this is what sets us apart. This is what makes us be a light of what set apartness is, when we obey and guard his laws. And the people should see how we don't do what they do, but what we do and why we do it. And always ready to give a reason, because some may ask, why do you do that? Why don't you do this? That's when we have the ability to share why, because we're set apart. You know, and we're living set apart lives. Verses 9 to 21 actually warns us against the consequences of actually not adhering to these instructions, by breaking the instructions of set apart living. That's been laid out for all Israel. It's not just for some, everyone who claims to be Israel, and that is now Messiah Yahushua, his body, and he our head, the one who rules with El. You have to be set apart. And if you're not, you'll be cut off. Because verse 22 to 26 expresses the need for us to understand the whole of Wayyiqra. Because if we do what the nations do, Yahweh will vomit us out like he will do with the nations. Now, the Hebrew word for vomit is koah. It means vomit, spew out, disgorge. Now, I know, you know, sometimes these words we've got to express, because the Hebraic language is very, how can I say, visual. So even in the sound, koah, it's very descriptive. The primitive verb koah is used 8 times in 7 verses. 4 times in 3 verses it's used in Wayyiqra to describe how the land vomited out the crooked. And it's also used to describe how Yonah was vomited from the fish, the big fish, you know. We also see in Eov, when Eov was going through all his turmoil that Yahweh had allowed, and his friends that were coming to speak to him, and Zophar speaks in chapter 20, verse 15, and he's speaking about the wrong. In speaking of the wrong, he says, he has swallowed down riches, then vomits them up. El drives it out of his stomach. So in other words, he's getting the picture here that the wrong that's chased all his wealth and eats up everything that they can, Yahweh causes them to vomit it up. Because you think that's what satisfies you, and you're going to show that it's not going to satisfy, because it's going to be gone. And it's going to be worthless to you. You know, we've been given the Torah that we are to diligently guard. We are to not walk according to the customs and the traditions of the world. We are not to be found conforming to the corrupt patterns of this world, but rather lay hold of the life-giving commands of our Creator and Master, because verse 24 tells us that we are going to possess the land. I mean, we're still going to inherit this earth. The meek will inherit the earth. This is a promise that is yes and amen in Messiah that we still hold firm to. You know, the Hebrew word for possess, yaresh, means both to possess and to take inheritance or occupy and seize, but it also means to dispossess, depending on its use. So it teaches us a valuable lesson. In order for us to take possession of the promises in the Master, we must dispossess and disinherit the lies and the corruption, so that we can make a distinction between the set apart and the profane. You know, in this chapter, 3 times we see Yahweh making it clear about separation and making a distinction. I am Yahweh your Elohim who has separated you from the peoples. You shall make a distinction between the clean beasts and the unclean. We've been through the food laws already in Wayyiqra 14, Devarim 14, Wayyiqra 11, you know. And he says, I am Yahweh, I am set apart, I have separated you. So separated, make a distinction, and separated again from the peoples to be his, is from the word badal, which means to make a distinction. So Yahweh has clearly made a distinction of who is his and who is not his. So we must realize that when Yahweh says, Yaakov I have loved, Esau I have hated, he's already separated those who are his and those who are not. Those who are of the Spirit and walk according to his commands, he loves to 1,000 generations. It's an everlasting love. Where those that walk according to the flesh, as Esau, he hates. So this notion of that Yahweh loves everybody is not scriptural. Does he desire that everybody chooses? Yes, while he laid down his life, he first loved us. So he provided that means for all. But if you hate him by not obeying him, because this is love for Elohim when we guard his commands, which means to hate Elohim is to disregard his commands. And if you hate him, he's not there saying, I still love you. He's compassionate and desiring that all men are saved, that all can be loved by his everlasting love, because his love is available for all. But there is a distinction between those he loves and those he hates. Yahweh says he hates the prayer of the wicked. He hates the sinner. And this is something that, sadly, in a misguided and corrupted worship system that we came out from, has promoted. And many who come on this walk still bring that mindset of a under grace. We are a subjection to his grace. We were saved by his grace, his favor. Now, having been saved by favor, we are to walk in love, which is to obey his commands, so that we know that we love him, that he loves us, and that we're known by him. But to disregard that with an assumption, he'll just accept me, he loves me by grace, but not having regard for his commands, there's a shocking revelation that's coming at his revelation, where those who disregard his word and do not show love toward him will be destroyed. You know, Yechezkel 43, in describing the house, its design, its measurements, that Yechezkel was told to tell a backsliding house, because when they hear the measurements, they will be ashamed of their wayward ways. And so when we go through the Torah and the mirror cuts deep, or the sword of the word through the mirror cuts deep, and so that we're ashamed of the ways that we were following in ignorance, but now we realize we shouldn't be doing that, then how do we do what we are supposed to do? We learn the measurements. This is a picture of every week where Moshe is read. We learn what set apartness is. Yechezkel 43 verse 12 says, this is the Torah of the house. Upon the mountain top, all the boundary of it, all around, is most set apart. This is the Torah of the house. The Torah of the house, which we are, is to be most set apart. In fact, you can't just be partly set apart, because then you're not set apart. But the idea of most set apart is, you know what? When we look at the design of the tabernacle, you have the set apart place. And within the dwelling place, you have the set apart place, and then you have the most set apart place. And that most set apart place is about intimacy. That ability to draw near to the throne by the blood of Messiah, which the high priest was only able to do once a year with the blood of bulls and goats. Now, the Torah of the house to be most set apart is this invitation to be one with Yahweh by complete obedience. But you can't become into that most set apart place if you haven't maintained the standard of set apartness by which the set apart place teaches us in terms of Sabbath keeping and feast keeping and guarding of the commands, through the washing of the word and the daily dying to self as a living sacrifice. Having come to the door and been washed, I've just gone backwards from inner place to the tent door for those in your mind, because we learn from that pattern. To be most set apart is always the aim of Yahweh desiring to be with us. where he's seated on a throne and we are ruling with him. That's the Torah of the house. That's why Yahweh has given all of this, so that we can be with him. And that there will be no profanity found within his borders. The Torah of the house is complete set apartness. Hebrews 12 verse 14 says we must pursue peace with all and pursue apartness, without which no one will see the master. If we're not running after, in a sense, in pursuit of complete set apartness, we're not every eye will see him, but when it says we will not see the master, is that we won't come into that inner chamber, but we'll be separated for judgment. 2 Corinthians 7 verse 1 says, having then these promises, beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all defilement of flesh and spirit, perfecting set apartness in the fear of Elohim. In other words, set apartness is something that we can perfect, which means it takes an ongoing discipline, diligent obedience, and understanding that grows, that we don't now discard the need to obey, thinking now more intimacy is had. The intimacy grows in our understanding of why we guard the commands. Does that make sense? And everyone wishing to live reverently in the present age, Shaul reminds Timotheus, will be persecuted. Now, how fit are you in the pursuit of apartness? Are you running in the way of the commands of Elohim? You know, we need to embrace the heart of the psalmist that celebrated the Torah. You know, I do believe, as I've said many times, that Ezra wrote Tehillah 119. Now, in the past, I may have thought it was David, because most of the time we're brought up thinking David wrote all the Psalms, you know. He wrote the majority of them, but not all of them. And the psalmist highlights when they came back from captivity and rebuilt the walls and understood. We've just been through a lot of the lessons from that time with the rebuilding and the joy of Yahweh, our strength, etc. In verses 29 to 33 of Tehillah 119, he says, remove from me the way of falsehood and favor me with your Torah. Most people today, I'm going to carry on, but think about that. Most people today, they think, okay, I've got the Torah, I've got that down pat now I don't need, favor me with your Torah. You know, that same word for favor is the same word that's described as grace, which shows that grace cannot be grace without the Torah. You know, favor me with your Torah. I have chosen the way of truth. Your right rulings I have held level. I have clung to your witnesses. O Yahweh, do not put me to shame. I run the way of your commands, for you enlarge my heart. Teach me, O Yahweh, the way of your laws, and I observe it to the end. When he says, do not put me to shame, he's saying, listen, I've clung to your witnesses. I've held your rulings, right rulings, I've held level. We go back to Yechezkiel when he was told to give the measurements of the house so that they are ashamed. He's saying, I've done everything, I'm clinging to you. Please don't put me to shame. Favor me with your Torah. I want to do what's right. I want to be in the ways. Teach me your laws. I don't want to be outside of your laws because I want to observe it to the end. And that's the heart that we are to have, because that's the passion and the zeal we should have in pursuing apartness, running in the way of his commands with joy and fervency, this rejoicing heart that says, wow, we now have a standard that we get to live by. That's a race that we want to be part of. Scripture makes it abundantly clear that the Torah of the house is set apartness. That's what Yahweh expects of us. It's what he wants from us, and it's what he desires from us. And as we understand that set apartness befits your house forever, Yahweh, and that Hebrew word for befits, that's in Tehillah, I think it's 93. Set apartness befits your house forever. The word befits is na'ah. And it means to be comely, befitting, to be beautiful, to be lovely. And this verb actually denotes the state of being beautiful or suitable. So what makes you beautiful and suitable is set apartness. It's only used 3 times in Scripture, in Tehillah 93. It's also used in Song of Shlomo, or Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, in 1 verse 10, to actually describe the cheeks of a beautiful woman. And in Yeshayahu 52 verse 7, it speaks of the pleasant feet of him who brings the good news, who proclaims peace, who proclaims deliverance, who says to Zion, your Elohim reigns. So our ability to proclaim the reign is what befits the house. It's what adorns us. It's what makes us beautiful. The feet that we have to not be bound in chains of depravity, but to be released to actually, I go back to what we started this feast with about leaping with joy and having this joy in the Master, you know. That's what set apartness truly does to a person when they pursue it. It just releases so much of the rubbish from our lives that we can actually get adorned and be a fit house for the Master, one that he is coming to inhabit and booth with, you know. Tehillah 29 verse 2 says, ascribe to Yahweh the esteem of his name, bow yourselves to Yahweh in the splendor of set apartness. The Hebrew word for splendor is hadara, which means adornment, attire, beauty, honor, and it highlights the need for us to be adorned or clothed with his beauty that he's given us, because he's clothed us with garments of righteousness, set apart garments that we are to keep clean, until a time where we will be changed in the twinkling of an eye, and then this corruption will put on incorruption, and this mortality will put on immortality. And this word hadara also expresses the understanding of something that's actually seen publicly. It's not only representing the adornment for royalty, but also the actions that are worthy of a royal position. It highlights our need to be active in our loving commitment of our Master and having the fruit of our lives resulting in the beauty of set apartness. In other words, when we see set apartness as something that is beautiful in our Master's eyes, then surely we want to be beautiful. Surely we want to be beautiful before him. You know, there's many Shirleys out there, but surely this is the kind of surely that I want to see as a positive one, not as Satan says, surely it doesn't mean this. No, surely you want to be beautiful in the Master's eyes. Amen. Yahweh reigns, and set apartness befits his house. And so this is what we are called to. We are called to set apartness, not uncleanness. And so as we've just been through these 2 chapters of Wayyiqra 19 to 20, I pray that just going through this word, that there's a stirring in one's inner being, a fervent igniting, a fanning into flame to assess one's walk and to make that cognitive choice to consciously strive to be most set apart, guarding the Torah of the house as we pursue apartness and run in the way of his commands. Amen. Any thoughts on today's readings? Yes, Jackie.
Verses.
Yes.
The one verse is, there were 7 brothers, and the wife of the first one became the wife. And the third.
Yes.
Then there's a verse that says, if a brother does not have children,
Yes.
and he dies, then his brother's first child becomes by the wife.
Mhm.
Becomes his.
Yes, yes.
This one says, and a man takes his brother's wife, but they end up childless. How do these?
The living. It's a living brother. When he takes his brother's wife, so his brother hasn't died.
End of as they are childless.
Yes. So the curse that's upon them,
Living brothers.
he took his living brother's wife. Now they will end childless. There will be no furthering of the seed there. So there won't be a continuation now because you've corrupted the line. So
You took your sister-in-law. Not a widow.
she's not a widow. It's not her husband hasn't died. So yeah, it's like saying, if my brother's wife, they're still alive, but I now go take my brother's wife. That's what it's saying. Then you only take your brother's wife if there has been no offspring when he dies, to not let his name be cut off. Yes. Okay. Well, we're going to close a few minutes earlier than normal for lunch. We will still come back Are we going to come back at 2 or 2:30? Yeah, we're gonna do our best to come back at 2. Obviously, at Sukkot camp, with having our lunch and just getting everything together, may take slightly longer than we're used to, but it's all been prepared, and we pray that everyone has a great lunch or breakfast right now, and we'll see you back at 2 as we plan to do, and we'll go through Yeshayahu 66 and Amos 9, and we'll finish off with what we almost started with in Kepha Aleph. Let's pray. Master Yahweh, we thank you and bless you and praise your wondrous and mighty name that we can sit here as the Qeḍoshim of Yahweh, the set apart ones. And we don't take lightly this title or phrase that marks us as your own, but we take it serious because it's you who sets us apart. And you do that by us being obedient to your word. You've given us everything that we need for you to set us apart, and therefore our lives should reflect that, and we desire that. And I pray that our hunger and thirst for righteousness will be met by the fullness that your word gives us, and that we wouldn't lose that hunger and thirst, but we will continue to find the nourishment that we have, always seeking to know more about you, to grow in the knowledge of you, to grow in the intimacy so that we be more set apart. We thank you, Master Yahweh, that we can partake in a meal together as part of the Sabbath, and the Sabbath table that we come into in the set apart place, and drawing near to you. We thank you that you've given us access through your blood, that we can partake in a meal that solidifies and secures our identity in you. And I pray that the words that we've heard today will be words that we do take to heart, that we allow the mirror of the word to cause us to be a people that don't forget what we ought to look like, so that we are on guard against our garments becoming defiled in any way. Thank you for your provision, your protection, your guidance, your complete joy over us, your shalom, in the name of Yahushua our Messiah, and pray your blessing over every home, to your esteem and praise. Amen and amen.